Good morning, patron subscribers. We're going to go through pan and scan on the currencies and we can see if we can spot any setup. So you can see how the dollar Swiss is breaking the weekly open and it's likely possibly going to target the SLC. So, that could have been a trade setup. It might be a bit late now, but also what we need to do is delete these fibs as well because this is from last week. So we need to delete them. So if we see any fibs, they need to be deleted. So currently quite bearish, and we might target the SLC, but it's not, 12 pips. So it's not particularly worth doing. It's probably better to wait for the stop loss cluster to be probed first, and then you're looking for a long, maybe a stop here potentially. So I think that might be job done, and then reversal. So there's no trade set up there, which is fine. We'll look at EJ because it's our trade of the day, and it did some very naughty moves the last hour, and had to test the weekly open. There's your SLC, 14150, one below. Oh God, come on, load. Well, you've got your targets in the SL anyway on the Discord. So, but there's the stop loss clusters, and there is much to be said there because we've given you the targets. So, they've moved their stops higher, which is really interesting. So that's normally fairly bullish in so much as that if they move their stops higher, it's just giving it a better risk to reward for the big fish. If the stops cluster is close, it's probably not that much motivation to pump price. Now there's a little bit more motivation to pump price because they moved their stops higher. So that was a good demo. I think I've got something over here. What that is. Not sure what that is. Fibbo, delete that. Strange. Something over here. So yeah, it might be okay. So we had to have a fairly wide stop because of that. We have to, envision and cater for these big moves. So our stop was quite wide, and it was wide enough to counter that move there. Very frustrating, I will be honest, and I'll have to wait and see what happens. So do note they moved their stops higher, and we have a trade set up on this already. Let's look at EU. Dollar Swiss was falling, if you remember. EU, which we could do a weekly open to SLC, but it's 15 pips, so it's probably not worth doing. It might be better for the stop loss cluster to get raided first, and then we can trade off the weekly open. I'm about to say weekly pivot then, but weekly open. So I think pump, and then we'll have to wait and see. And it might be a case of selling below the weekly open to target SLC or monthly pivot. So theoretically, we could do something like this, where we're looking to enter here. No, we're going to enter here, and this is where your stop's going to be. So, I mean, they might move their stops high like they did on EJ. So you're looking for a pump to take liquidity, and then you're looking to sell below the weekly open, and then to target, maybe get a 4R, potentially. But I won't put this onto Discord because obviously, it's not like an amazing setup. And also they might move their stops higher. And also, we have to remember like fundamentals and our risk calculation and things like that. Our risk calculation was quite risk on, and that can help the euro against the USD. So we have to remember fundamentals. But potentially it might be a setup, liquidity probe, wait for those stops to be taken, and you're selling below the weekly open to target, maybe even monthly pivot, which would be like greater than the 4R. So we'll keep this fib on here, but it isn't going to be a trade. So that's important to note. It's just an idea, potentially, what might happen tomorrow. So GU. And that's fine. I don't think there's anything here, is there? Doesn't look like it. 12280 and 12181. 85, 12185. Yeah. And nothing there. There isn't any trade set up there. So yeah, wait for that potentially. Wait for that. You need to wait for those stop loss clusters to get probed, and then we can trade off them. But there aren't any levels to be working with that are close to the stop loss clusters. So nothing there. So potentially EU sell, maybe EU. So we know that the Aussie bubble should be performing poorly. I see it's moved away now. We were over here on the Aussie, and so we're seeing it move away from extremes. That's in itself fairly bullish in a way, because we were quite bearish and we're less bearish. We're seeing a reduction of those volumes. If they continue, it's going to gravitate down here, and then it'll just be yen all by itself, which is very, very interesting. So AU, Aussie was over here earlier, and it's gravitated over. So it's going to be poor old yen all by itself. So that's really interesting. So maybe there might be something on the Aussie from here. Yeah, so where would you put your stop? Yeah, so like you can't, if you enter above the weekly open, your stop's here, 30 pips. Your TP is less than 30 pips, so it's not even a 1 hour trade. But I think potentially what might happen is that we're going to come up, get that, and then we'll have to wait and see what happens. But we're basically 50-50 in between the stop loss clusters. Load of liquidity below, so perhaps it might just want that first 30 pip drop, and then we can bounce. So no trade set up there, and then we can have a look what happens after the liquidity has been taken. And you're looking for, you know, price to exceed ATR target or ATR target, where, you know, we've still got a way off there, but you know, the liquidity is much larger below. However, the Aussie bubble has moved substantially on our bubbles. We were well over here, and now what's happened is that they started to sell it by shorting the Aussie. It's bringing it down, and the bubbles are all going to be all bunched up, which is really interesting. And I guess we can look at Swiss, because we know Swiss is strong. But the dollar Swiss we covered, didn't we? So can't show you the euro Swiss because we don't have stop loss clusters, which is fine. That's fine. So that's not really a problem. Maybe Kiwi. Maybe try and get a trade set up on something. But we've got an idea on the EU. Likewise, we're pretty much 50-50. 19 pips. 21 pips. Right, so it could go either way. We're above the weekly open, so that's bullish. So I think the one above is probably going to be likely, but there's no trade set up there. So I think we might just have to go back to EU to look for a short, potentially. And we'll just cover that again before I close the video. And likewise, 50-50. Well, we're not now. We were at the weekly open. You know, at the weekly open, 24, 25. Now, because we're below the weekly open, we're now 15, 36. So it's looking like it might want to get some stops below. And then we look for a trade after the liquidity has been taken. But it's very interesting how a lot of the SLCs were poised at like exact spacing at the weekly open. Very interesting. And so we'll go back to EU. And just to confirm that this isn't going to be a trade setup right now, we're going to wait for the liquidity to get probed first. And then we're going to look to short below the weekly open to target maybe monthly pivot. And that's that. So EJ being a bit tricky. And so this will be something that we'll look at tomorrow, EU, okay? And we see a wicking quite hard above, and so it's just, you know, very tricky, and it might want to get that, which would mean that we would get stopped out because our stop's at 14050. So if we do go and get that stop loss cluster, it'll take us out as well. So yeah, it's just one of those things, isn't it? We've got to be very careful. Long wicks above, normally, typically speaking, bearish pressure. But we've got 45 minutes left of 15 minutes left of this half an hour, and then, you know, we might just see price come up eventually. We have got the weekly and daily open, and we are a buy at the big picture, and we made a buy on the FXCM train station. So if all those things don't pan out and it results in a loss, we'll just simply revise our trade set up to have orders, not to enter at market, because we entered at market, initially did really well. We had a big pump, and then then a dump, right? So if we have an order to buy, then eliminates that chop. Admittedly, you could have probably got out if you've made 20 pips. If you stop ahead at entry, you could go like out, but it's just one of those things, isn't it? So pump and dump, and then God knows what's going to happen here. Maybe we'll get stopped out, and then if we do, then we'll just look at orders to place orders to buy or sell at particular levels. So I think maybe EU could be a good one tomorrow, and we'll have to wait for that liquidity to get probed first before we can really make, a decent assumption on what's going to happen. We might not even come up to get the SLC, but if we do, then it's maybe quite a good idea to short, and we'll target monthly pivot, and that's what we'll do.